How could sleeping with his cousin to make him jealous end up destroying our marriage? What happens when you manipulate your partner and he doesn't react the way you expect? I thought I had the upper hand, but in the end, I lost everything. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Vera, and I'm about to tell you the story that destroyed my marriage. It didn't happen overnight, but the beginning of the end started with one decision, one moment of pure desperation, and the results of that choice spiraled out of my control faster than I could have ever imagined. I've always been the kind of person who craves attention. Growing up, I was never the most popular girl in school, but I always knew how to get noticed. I wore the loudest clothes, made the boldest jokes, and somehow people gravitated toward me. When I met Ethan, I thought I had finally found someone who would make me feel secure and loved. He was calm, steady, and predictable in the best way. At first, I loved that about him, but as the years went on, the predictability of it all began to wear on me. Ethan was a good husband, a reliable husband, the kind of guy who would show up on time, always be there when I needed him, and never cause drama. But after 5 years of marriage, I started feeling like I was missing something. I was beginning to get bored with the routine. Ethan's calmness was starting to feel like indifference. He didn't show excitement in our relationship anymore, not the kind of excitement I craved. He never looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman in the room, not like he used to when we were dating. He didn't flirt with me, didn't seek me out for attention, and for a while I told myself I didn't care, but deep down, I wanted more. One day I was having a drink with my sister Maya, venting about how Ethan had become so emotionally distant. I kept repeating that I needed more from him, more passion, more effort, more desire. Maya listened patiently, but I could tell she was getting tired of hearing me complain. "Vera, maybe it's you who needs to change," she said, her voice a little too sharp. "You're not the same person you were when you met him. Maybe he feels like you've shut him out." I didn't want to hear it. I didn't think I'd changed. But in that moment, I couldn't deny that Maya had a point. I had stopped putting in the effort to be affectionate. I'd become so wrapped up in my own frustrations that I wasn't paying attention to Ethan anymore. He had tried in the beginning, but I stopped noticing. It wasn't his fault. It was mine. That night, as I lay next to Ethan, I kept thinking about what Maya had said. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd shut him out. But what if he just wasn't as interested anymore? What if he didn't desire me the way I needed him to? I wanted to test him. I wanted to see if I still mattered to him, if he still cared. But instead of talking to him about it, I decided to take a different route. I told myself it was harmless. It wasn't cheating after all. It was just a little game. A game to see if I could make him feel something. And so I made a plan. I didn't even tell Maya about it. But one night, when Ethan was working late, I invited his cousin, Ryan, over for drinks. Ryan and I had always been close. We'd shared a flirtatious energy since the first time we met, but nothing ever came of it. We were just two people who enjoyed each other's company. Ryan was easy to talk to, charming in a way that Ethan had never been, and I found myself drawn to him again. There was no denying the chemistry between us, but that night, the chemistry felt different. It felt dangerous. After a few drinks, we ended up on the couch, laughing about old memories. Ryan leaned in a little closer than usual, and before I knew it, we were kissing. It wasn't planned. It wasn't deliberate. It was just natural. At first, I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that it didn't mean anything. But deep down, I knew what it was. It was a way to get a reaction from Ethan. I told myself it would make him jealous. I told myself that it was just what we needed to shake things up. The next day, I waited for Ethan to react. He didn't. I watched him as he got up, kissed me goodbye, and left for work without saying a word about the night before. I expected anger. I expected something, anything, but he showed no emotion. Nothing. It was like he didn't care. I was furious. How could he not care? I had just done something bold, something dangerous, and he didn't even flinch. I was looking for a fight. I wanted him to yell at me, to question me, to demand answers. But nothing came. I spent the rest of the day stewing in my own frustration. Had I really done this for nothing? Was Ethan really that indifferent? I had hoped he'd react, that he'd show me he cared, but the silence was unbearable. By the time he came home that evening, I was on edge, waiting for him to say something, anything. But when he walked through the door, he didn't even glance at me. He just set his briefcase down, went straight to the kitchen, and started making dinner. I watched him, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I opened my mouth to speak, but I couldn't find the words. Instead, I tried to act like nothing had happened. I smiled and tried to be casual, like everything was fine. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaky, "are you okay?" He looked at me then, and for a moment, I thought he was going to say something. But instead, he just nodded. "Yeah," he said, his voice flat. "I'm fine." That was it. He didn't ask about Ryan. He didn't ask about what had happened. Nothing. That night, as we ate dinner in silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I had expected him to react, to fight for me. But he didn't. He just accepted it. I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know what to do with the fact that Ethan wasn't reacting the way I had hoped. My plan was backfiring. The next few days were a blur. I kept waiting for him to bring it up, to talk about it, but he didn't. He went about his life like nothing had changed, and I was left to wonder if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I was still trying to process everything when my sister, Maya, called. She asked how things were going with Ethan, and I found myself blurting out everything that had happened. I told her about the kiss with Ryan, how I had hoped it would make Ethan jealous, how I wanted to see if he cared, but I could hear the disappointment in Maya's voice when she said, "Vera, this isn't the way to fix things." I didn't want to hear it. I was too deep in my own self-justification to care. But Maya didn't give up. "You need to talk to him," she insisted. "If you want to fix your marriage, you have to be honest." I wasn't ready for that kind of honesty. I wasn't ready to face the truth. Instead, I chose to play the game a little longer. I decided I would make Ethan see me, make him feel something, even if it meant pushing him further away. But what I didn't realize was that Ethan wasn't the one who was about to be manipulated. I was, and that's when everything started to unravel. The next few days passed in a haze. I kept waiting for Ethan to react, but he didn't. I had expected him to be upset, angry, or maybe even distant, but nothing. He was like a wall, completely unbothered. At first, I thought he was just processing everything quietly, giving me space to come to him, but as time went on, it became clear that he wasn't processing anything. He wasn't feeling anything. It was like I didn't even exist in his world anymore. The silence between us grew, and I couldn't help but feel like I was suffocating in it. I kept replaying the night with Ryan in my mind, trying to convince myself it was harmless. It was just one kiss, one fleeting moment. Ethan didn't have to know the details. But even I knew deep down that it wasn't harmless. It was a betrayal, and I had done it on purpose. I had hoped it would shake Ethan out of his indifference, make him care again. I thought if I pushed him enough, he'd finally see me, really see me, and I'd feel alive again. But instead, I felt like I was drowning in guilt. And still, Ethan said nothing. He went about his days like nothing had changed. He'd come home from work, make dinner, and sit on the couch with his phone, scrolling through whatever. No confrontation, no questions. Nothing. Just an eerie calmness that made my skin crawl. I wanted him to yell at me, to demand an explanation, to make me feel something, anything, for what I had done. But he didn't. I remember one evening, sitting at the dinner table, the smell of pasta filling the kitchen. It was a typical Tuesday night, and yet it felt like everything was wrong. The silence between us was suffocating. I could barely look at him without feeling the weight of my actions. I had expected him to call me out, but he just ate his food, his eyes glued to the TV, like nothing had changed. I couldn't take it anymore. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "are you even angry with me?" He didn't look up from his plate. "I'm not angry," he said quietly. "I'm just tired." "Tired of what?" I pressed, hoping he would give me something to work with. "Tired of me? Tired of this marriage?" He set his fork down and finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "No, I'm just tired of pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not." That hit me harder than I expected. He was tired of pretending. Pretending about what? Had he known all along that something was wrong, but he just didn't want to deal with it? Or was he just giving up on me? "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I just wanted to feel something, anything." He stared at me for a long time before speaking again. "You wanted me to react, but I'm not going to give you the satisfaction of a reaction. This isn't a game, Vera." I felt my stomach drop. "So that's it. You're just done. No fight, no anger." "I'm not done, but I'm not going to chase after you, Vera. If you're looking for drama, you'll have to find it somewhere else." His words stung. I had expected him to fight for me, to make me feel guilty, to make me see how wrong I was. But instead, he just sat there, calm and collected, like he had already moved on. It felt like a slap in the face. I didn't know how to handle his indifference. It was the opposite of what I wanted. I had been trying to get him to react, but this cold, distant behavior was worse than anything. The days after that conversation were even worse. Ethan started staying out later, working longer hours. He wasn't coming home until after 8 p.m., and when he did, he was distant. The only time we spoke was about household matters, who was picking up groceries, or when the laundry needed to be done. Nothing personal, nothing emotional. It felt like we were roommates, not a married couple. I tried to push him, to get him to engage, but every time I brought it up, he just shut down. He'd say things like, "I'm busy," or "let's talk later." But later never came. I felt like I was losing him, and I didn't know how to stop it. A part of me wanted to give up, to stop trying to fix things, but then another part of me couldn't let go. I couldn't let him win, couldn't let him think I was the problem. I needed him to know that I wasn't just some ungrateful wife. I had feelings too. I was hurting too. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't break through the wall he had put up between us. That's when the thought hit me. What if he really didn't care anymore? What if all of this, everything, had been a waste? My actions, my attempts to get his attention, had all been for nothing. Maybe I had pushed him too far, and now there was no coming back. I was losing him, and I didn't know how to get him back. I spent the next few days thinking about how to fix things, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't. Ethan was done with me. He had stopped fighting, stopped trying to make things work. It was like he had already written me off, and I was just too blind to see it. I hated that feeling. I hated that I was the one who had messed everything up. I had hoped that making Ethan jealous would make him care again, but it had only pushed him further away. Now I was left with nothing but my own regret and guilt. The worst part was that I had no one to talk to. Maya had warned me that I was going about things the wrong way, but I hadn't listened. I had thought I knew best, but now I was realizing how wrong I had been. I didn't know how to fix what I had broken. I didn't even know if Ethan wanted me to fix it. I tried reaching out to Ryan, the cousin I had kissed, but he had pulled back too. I had hoped he would be a distraction, but now he was just another reminder of my mistake. He didn't want to be involved in my mess. He didn't want to be the reason for my failed marriage. Everything felt so overwhelming. I wanted to scream, to shout, to tell Ethan everything I was feeling, but every time I tried, he shut me down. It was like I didn't exist anymore. I was just a ghost in his life, and it was suffocating. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. But I also didn't know how to change things. I didn't know how to make Ethan care again. I had done everything wrong, and now I was paying the price. The days stretched on, each one feeling heavier than the last. I couldn't escape the constant knot in my stomach. Every morning, I woke up, turned over to find Ethan's side of the bed still cold, and felt a pang of dread. It wasn't just that he was distant, it was the fact that he was emotionally absent, as if he had already moved on from me long before I realized it. My entire world felt like it was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I started obsessing over the smallest details. Every text he sent, every time he came home late, I scrutinized it, trying to figure out if there was still a spark of care left in him. But the more I searched, the more I came up empty. The coldness I had seen in him before was becoming permanent. It was like he had mentally checked out of our relationship, and I was left scrambling to understand why. There was a part of me that tried to cling to hope. I told myself that maybe this was just a phase, maybe he was processing things in his own way. I tried talking to him, but each time I did, it was like talking to a brick wall. The few words he spoke felt so carefully measured, so detached. It wasn't just a lack of emotion, it was like he had resigned himself to the idea that nothing would ever change. I thought back to the time when we were so in love, when he would hold me close and tell me how much he adored me. I missed that version of him, the one who made me feel like I was the center of his world. Now I didn't even know who he was anymore. It wasn't just the distance that hurt, it was the fact that I was the cause of it. I had tried to make him jealous, to force him to feel something for me again, but instead, I had pushed him further away. I couldn't help but wonder if I had ruined everything beyond repair. It wasn't just the kiss with Ryan. It was the lie I had built around it, the way I had manipulated Ethan's feelings. I didn't even recognize the person I had become. I began to feel suffocated by my own actions. Every time I looked at Ethan, I felt a mix of guilt and anger. Guilt because I knew I had betrayed him, and anger because he wasn't reacting the way I had hoped. I wanted him to fight for me. I wanted him to get angry, to confront me about what I had done. But instead, he just withdrew. The silence between us grew louder each day, a constant reminder of how far I had pushed him. I started to notice the way he was changing, the way he spent more time at work, coming home late with the excuse that he had a lot to do. It wasn't like before, when he would come home and we'd spend time together, even if it was just watching TV. Now, he seemed to have no interest in anything I did. If I tried to talk to him about something, he'd give me a brief response, then retreat into his own world. It was like I was living with a stranger. I knew I had to do something to fix things, but every time I tried, I only made it worse. I started questioning myself. Was this my fault? Had I destroyed everything? Could I ever get him back? One evening, after another long day of silence, I decided to confront him. I couldn't keep living like this, pretending everything was fine when it clearly wasn't. I knew it would be difficult, but I had to try. I had to understand where we stood, even if the answer was painful. When Ethan walked through the door that night, I took a deep breath and decided to speak up. "Ethan," I said, my voice shaking, "we need to talk." He looked at me, his face unreadable. "About what?" he asked, his tone flat. "About us," I replied, my heart racing. "About everything that's been happening. The silence, the distance. I need to know where we stand." He set his briefcase down on the couch, then turned to face me. "I've been clear about where I stand," he said, his voice calm. "I'm not going to pretend everything is fine when it isn't." I flinched at his words. It felt like a slap in the face. "So that's it? You're just done?" "I'm not done," he said quietly. But I can't keep pretending either. I can't keep waiting for things to change when I know they won't. You've made it clear what you want, and I can't keep ignoring it. But I'm not going to fight for something that doesn't exist anymore. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say. You're not going to fight for us? No, he replied, his voice steady. I've been fighting for a long time, Vera, but every time I try, I end up feeling like I'm losing more of myself. I can't keep doing that. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had pushed him so far that he had completely shut down. The man I had once known and loved was gone, and I had no one to blame but myself. I could feel tears welling up in my eyes, but I fought to keep them back. Ethan, please, I pleaded, my voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was just trying to make you care again. I didn't know what else to do. You didn't know what else to do, he repeated, his tone colder than I had ever heard it. You should have talked to me, Vera. You should have told me how you were feeling. Instead, you chose to hurt me. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. I couldn't deny it. He was right. I had chosen to hurt him. I had made the worst decision possible, and now I was paying the price. I don't know how to fix this, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I don't know how to make you want me again. Ethan didn't answer. He just stared at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know either, Vera. I don't know if we can fix this. The finality of his words hit me like a wave, drowning me in a sea of regret. I had tried to fix things by manipulating him, by making him feel something, anything, but all I had done was break us even more. I had lost him, and I didn't know how to get him back. In the silence that followed, I realized that Ethan was already gone, emotionally. He wasn't going to fight for me, and I couldn't blame him. I had pushed him away, and now I was left with nothing but the consequences of my own actions. I watched him turn and walk toward the guest room, where he had been sleeping for the past few nights. It felt like the final blow. I had pushed him so far that he had already started to separate from me, physically and emotionally. I stayed in the living room, feeling like a stranger in my own home. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and the loneliness was unbearable. I had lost the man I loved, and all I had left was the empty space between us. For the first time in a long time, I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't know if it could be fixed. All I could do was sit in the silence and face the reality that my choices had destroyed everything. The days following that conversation felt like a blur, as though I was moving through life underwater. Everything seemed distant, muffled. The quiet between Ethan and me was deafening. I would wake up each morning, alone in a bed that used to feel so full of warmth, but now felt cold and empty. I could feel the weight of the distance between us with every glance, every word he didn't say. His absence wasn't just physical anymore, it was emotional too. I wasn't sure which hurt more. I tried to act normal. I tried to pretend like everything was fine, that nothing had changed. I still went about my day like I always did. I would put on a smile, make small talk with the neighbors, and go to work. But when I was alone, the reality of my situation would hit me, and the crushing guilt would wash over me again. I knew that Ethan had already begun to detach. That was clear, but I wasn't ready to admit it. I still held on to the hope that we could fix things. Maybe if I just showed him that I understood the weight of what I had done, he would forgive me. Maybe if I apologized enough, begged enough, he would eventually come back to me. But the longer I waited, the more I realized that my expectations were unrealistic. I had crossed a line I couldn't erase, and no amount of pleading would undo it. I couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was just waiting for me to get the message. He had already checked out. He was done with me. The realization was hard to swallow. The person I had been married to for years, the man who I thought would always fight for us, had stopped caring. I had broken him, and now I was left with the pieces of a marriage that was falling apart faster than I could keep up. I remember one night in particular. Ethan came home late again, like he had been doing for the past few weeks. I was sitting in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. When he walked in, he didn't even look at me. He just hung his jacket on the hook and walked straight to the kitchen, like I wasn't even there. I wanted to say something, to make him acknowledge me, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed by my own guilt. I couldn't face him. I couldn't face the fact that I had ruined everything. "Ethan," I finally said, my voice barely a whisper, "can we talk?" He didn't respond right away. He kept pouring himself a drink, then sat down at the table. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I thought maybe he would say something, anything, but he didn't. He just stared at me, as if he was waiting for me to speak first. "I don't know what to say anymore," I said, my voice trembling. "I know I've messed up. I know I hurt you. But I'm so sorry, Ethan. I didn't mean for things to get this way." He didn't flinch. He didn't move. He just kept staring at me, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched on until it felt unbearable. "You've said that before," he said finally, his voice flat. "You're sorry, but sorry doesn't change anything. You don't just get to apologize and expect everything to go back to normal." I felt my heart sink. He was right. Saying sorry didn't fix anything. I had been so focused on getting a reaction from him that I hadn't thought about how my actions would affect him. I had crossed a line, and now I was paying the price. "I don't know what else to do, Ethan," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to make it right." He looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. "It's not just about making it right, Vera. It's about trust, and I don't know if I can trust you anymore." His words hit me harder than I expected. Trust. I had destroyed the one thing that held us together, and now I wasn't sure how to rebuild it. I didn't know if I could. "I don't want to lose you," I said, the desperation in my voice evident. "Please don't give up on us. We can figure this out. I'll do whatever it takes." Ethan shook his head. "It's not about what you do now, Vera. It's about what you've already done. And right now, I don't think I can keep going like this." The finality in his voice was like a punch to the gut. I had lost him. I could feel it. It was like all the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping for breath. "I'm sorry," I whispered again, but it felt hollow. Like the words had lost all meaning. I could tell by the look on his face that it was too late. Ethan didn't say anything else that night. He just got up, walked to the guest room, and shut the door. I heard the faint sound of the lock clicking into place, and that was it. I was alone. I spent the rest of the night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. The guilt, the sadness, the regret. It all washed over me in waves, crashing relentlessly. How had I let it get to this point? How had I been so blind to what I was doing to us? I had wanted excitement, attention, validation, but what I had ended up with was a broken marriage, and a man who no longer looked at me the same way. The next few days were the hardest. Ethan barely spoke to me. When he did, it was about logistics. Who was picking up groceries, when the bills needed to be paid. There were no more "how was your day" conversations. No more small talk. It was like we were strangers living in the same house. I tried to fill the silence with noise, TV, music, anything to drown out the deafening quiet between us. But nothing worked. Every time I looked at Ethan, I saw the pain I had caused him. I saw the man I had loved, but now it felt like he was a different person. I couldn't recognize him anymore. I started questioning everything. How had we gotten here? How had I gone from the woman he loved to someone he couldn't even look at without a sense of disdain? The worst part was that I knew I had brought this upon myself. I had pushed him to this point, convinced myself that I was justified in my actions. But now, sitting in the silence of our home, I realized just how wrong I had been. I thought back to the days when we were happy, when everything felt easy and natural. I wondered if I had taken it all for granted. Maybe I had spent too much time wanting more, chasing something that wasn't there instead of appreciating what I already had. But now it was too late. Ethan was emotionally gone. He had checked out long before I realized what was happening. and no amount of apologizing, no amount of begging was going to change that. I knew it was time to face the truth. I had destroyed my marriage, and there was no turning back. The thought of losing Ethan, of losing everything we had built together, was unbearable. But I also knew that I had no one to blame but myself. And in the silence of the guest room, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I knew that I was the one who had to live with the consequences of my choices. I woke up the next morning to the same silence. The house felt hollow, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. Ethan had already left for work when I opened my eyes, and once again, his side of the bed was untouched, the pillow still perfectly arranged as if he'd never laid down. It was such a stark contrast to how things used to be, how we used to be. I missed the warmth of him beside me, the casual comfort of his presence, but now there was just a cold emptiness that seemed to fill the entire house. I stayed in bed for a while, not sure what to do. I could hear the muffled sounds of the world outside, the cars driving by, birds chirping in the trees, but inside, everything felt still. The silence was deafening, and I hated it. I couldn't stand the thought of facing another day like this, but what was I supposed to do? I had ruined everything, and I didn't know how to fix it. When I finally dragged myself out of bed, I made coffee, just the way Ethan liked it, even though he hadn't mentioned it in days. I thought that maybe if I kept doing the little things, he might start to remember who I was, who we were. But as the coffee brewed and the familiar smell filled the kitchen, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was too late for all of that. I sat at the kitchen table sipping my coffee slowly, trying to force myself to think clearly. What was I supposed to do now? What was left to salvage? I had tried everything, but Ethan was shutting me out more and more each day. The distance between us was palpable, and I didn't know how to close the gap. I knew I had to face him. I couldn't keep running from the reality of what I had done. I couldn't keep hiding in the lies and the silence. I had to talk to him. But when I thought about it, when I tried to imagine what I would even say to him, I froze. What could I say that would make him forgive me? How could I convince him that I was still worth fighting for when I had done everything to push him away? I spent the rest of the morning pacing around the house, trying to gather my thoughts. I thought about texting him, but I knew that would only make things worse. I had to see him face to face. I had to apologize properly, beg for his forgiveness, and show him that I was truly sorry. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that apologizing wasn't enough. I had to show him that I was willing to do whatever it took to fix things. As I thought about everything that had happened, the guilt only intensified. I kept coming back to the same question. Why did I do it? Why had I tried to make him jealous in the first place? What had I been hoping for? The truth was, I had been craving attention, craving something that I felt had been missing for so long. But instead of talking to Ethan about it, instead of communicating like an adult, I had taken the cowardly route. I had betrayed his trust, and now I was left with the consequences. The worst part was knowing that I had hurt him, not just because of the affair, but because I had manipulated him, made him feel like he wasn't enough. I knew he had always been a patient man, a forgiving man, but I had taken advantage of that. I had pushed him too far, and now, it seemed, he was done. I texted him around noon, asking if we could talk when he got home. I didn't expect an immediate reply, but when he didn't respond, I felt the familiar anxiety creeping up again. Was he really done with me? Was I going to lose him for good? I tried to focus on work, but it was impossible to concentrate. All I could think about was the emptiness I felt when he wasn't around. It wasn't just the silence in the house. It was the silence between us. We used to laugh together, talk about our day, share our thoughts and dreams. Now, all we had were awkward silences and cold exchanges. By the time Ethan came home that evening, I was a bundle of nerves. My hands were trembling as I set the table for dinner, trying to act normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. Ethan walked in, his usual quiet self, but there was something different in the way he moved, in the way he looked at me. It wasn't the usual warmth that I used to see in his eyes. It was distant, guarded. He hadn't even taken off his coat when he walked past me to the kitchen. I stood in the doorway watching him. I could feel my heart racing, my throat tightening. I didn't know what to say. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. Finally, I managed to speak. "Ethan," I said softly, "I really need to talk to you." He didn't look at me at first, just grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with water. His movements were deliberate, slow, almost mechanical. "I know you're upset," I said, my voice shaky. "But please, can we just talk?" He set the glass down, then finally turned to look at me. His eyes were cold, distant, and I felt the weight of that look pressing down on me. "You've had plenty of chances to talk, Vera," he said quietly. "But every time we do, it's like we're going in circles." "I'm sorry," I whispered, my throat tight. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I need you to understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "You didn't mean for it to happen," he repeated, his voice flat. "You didn't mean to hurt me. I thought we were past the games, Vera. I thought we were beyond all of that. But you've crossed a line, and now I'm the one who has to pick up the pieces." His words cut through me, each one like a knife. I felt like I was suffocating, like the walls were closing in. "I'm sorry," I said again, but this time it didn't feel like enough. It didn't feel like it would fix anything. "Sorry isn't enough," Ethan said, his voice quieter now. "It's not just the affair. It's everything that led up to it. It's the lies, the manipulation, the way you've been treating me. Do you even realize what you've done?" I didn't know how to respond. He was right. I hadn't fully understood the depth of what I had done until now. I had been so focused on getting what I wanted that I hadn't stopped to think about how my actions would affect him. I hadn't considered how much I was breaking him. "I never meant to hurt you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I did, and I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I can fix it." Ethan stared at me for a long moment, then looked away. "I don't know if I can trust you again," he said quietly. I felt my heart shatter at his words. Trust, that was the thing that had always been the foundation of our relationship, the one thing that had kept us together through everything. And now, I had broken it. I didn't know how to rebuild it. I didn't know if he would ever be able to trust me again. "I don't know if I can either," I said softly, tears starting to well up in my eyes. "But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to try." Ethan didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, lost and alone. I was left with nothing but the sound of my own breath and the weight of my own mistakes. The silence between us had become so thick, so suffocating that I couldn't escape it. I had pushed him too far, and now I had to face the consequences. I had lost him, and I didn't know if I would ever get him back. The days after that night felt like a slow, inevitable march toward the end. Ethan's presence in the house was more like a shadow than a person. He was still there, physically, but emotionally, he had already checked out. We barely spoke, except for the occasional necessity. Who would handle the bills when the groceries were being delivered, or whether we should fix the leaky faucet? All the important things, the real connection, had withered away. I kept hoping, desperately clinging to the idea that things would change, that somehow I could make things right. But with each passing day, it became harder to ignore the fact that Ethan had already made his decision. He was done. I had broken him, and no matter how much I apologized, no matter how many times I promised to change, it wasn't going to undo the damage I had caused. One morning, I woke up to find a note on the kitchen counter. It was short, to the point. He didn't need to say much. His actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. "Vera, I've been thinking about everything. I need space. I'm filing for divorce. Ethan." I stared at the note, my hands shaking as I read it again. I couldn't breathe. I had known it was coming. But actually, seeing the words written down in front of me felt like a punch to the gut. Divorce. The word felt foreign, distant, and yet so real. I couldn't comprehend it, couldn't process it. How had I gotten here? How had everything fallen apart so quickly? I grabbed my phone, hoping that maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe this was just a bad dream. But when I opened my messages, there it was, a forwarded email from a law office with the subject line, "Divorce papers, next steps." It wasn't just a note, it was real. I collapsed onto the couch, my mind racing. The tears came then, hot, overwhelming, and relentless. I had always been a person who believed in second chances, in making things right when they were broken. But this felt final. Ethan wasn't just walking away. He was leaving. Completely. The reality of what I had done hit me harder than I could have ever imagined. I had destroyed everything. My marriage, my trust with Ethan, everything we had built together. And for what? To prove a point? To get attention? I had let my selfish need for validation tear apart the one thing that had meant more to me than anything else. I had no one to blame but myself. I spent the rest of the day in a daze, walking through the motions without really being present. I didn't know what to do. The house felt even emptier now, and I couldn't bear to look at the empty space where Ethan had once been. I thought about all the things we'd done together, the late-night conversations, the laughter, the plans for our future. It all felt so distant now, like it had never been real. That night, Ethan didn't come home. The guest room door remained shut. I lay in bed alone, the silence so thick I could feel it pressing against my chest. I had spent so much time trying to get his attention, trying to make him jealous. But in the end, it wasn't a jealous reaction I got. It was a cold, final decision to leave me behind. I had destroyed my marriage, and there was no way to undo it.